Carlson SurvPC version 7 comes loaded with new features to improve your experience in the field and save you time. This video is going to focus on just one of those features, which is the all-new enhanced graphical average. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to jump into the store points routine, and then I'm going to choose the average button on the right hand side, second button down. This is the same location it's always been in, but right away you're going to notice some changes to this screen. In version 6 and in previous versions, you could either set your average up to be a minimum measurement count or an amount of time. Beginning with version 7, you can actually set multiple requirements for your average. So what this means is that maybe I want to have a minimum measurement count of 120, so 120 measurements. And I could choose a time. So maybe if I'm in a position where I can't get a fix the whole time and I want to make sure I still get a certain amount of time in my data, I can set that as well. And I can choose a standard deviation. So this is a standard deviation of the average as the data is being collected, not to be confused with the RMS values of the GNSS position. So for this example, I'm going to set my minimum measurement count to 120. I'm not going to define time in minutes, but I am going to require a standard deviation of 0.02 on the horizontal and 0.03 on the vertical. With this definition, my average will not be complete until all of the requirements that I've set here are satisfied. I'm going to turn off this new option redundancy sessions for now because we're going to come back to that at the end of this video. Now looking at everything else that's on the screen, we have the configure button in the bottom left to reach your instrument configuration if you need to change anything. Just your IMU settings, some average settings in here, back out of there. You can change your tolerances before you begin, handy access. And if you want to look at Monitor SkyPlot to see the status of your receiver, that's here as well. Although you should note that we have the satellite count, the status, and the RMS values available on the screen already. So you can tell before you begin whether or not your receiver has a good fixed position. Now that I'm all set up, I'm going to go ahead and press the green check to begin my average. So let's talk about what we're looking at on this screen. The graphic in the middle is the live update of the positions as they are being collected. So what we can see here are the little black dots to represent each individual position. The pink cross represents the current average position, so that would be the average of the black dots. And then you have the error ellipse. The blue error ellipse is the 1 sigma error of all the positions that have been collected, all the ones that fall within 1 sigma. And then the green ellipse represents the positions that fall within 2 sigma. So it makes it really easy to see at a glance how close all your measurements are and whether or not you have outliers. So we can see here that we have a couple of these measurements that are outliers and have fallen outside of 2 sigma. On the rest of the screen, we can see the average position on the left, the current calculated average, so that's updating as we're collecting data. The horizontal and vertical range, so the broadest range on the horizontal and vertical, and the horizontal and vertical standard deviations. Up at the top, we can see the requirements of our average as they're being collected. So we can see that I'm looking for 60 of 120 measurements. Time is already green because I had no time requirement, and my horizontal and vertical standard deviation requirements have been met. So everything that is green represents a requirement that's met and ready to go. If we were outside of the horizontal or vertical standard deviation, we would see these values go red. And finally, you can see the status of your instrument up in the very top where you're used to seeing it. So if we tap on the graphic at any time, we can jump out of horizontal view and jump into vertical view. And here we see the vertical positions being graphed as they're collected. So we can see immediately if our verticals are outside of the range of what we expect, or if we have any huge outliers here, we can just watch them collect. And even on the vertical, the blue bar here represents the vertical measurements that are within 1 sigma deviation, and the green bar represents any that are in 2 sigma deviation, and you can see the individual black dots for each measurement. So I can see even on the vertical that I have a couple of outliers in this measurement. We're at 118. When I reach the total number of measurements and my standard deviations are within what I've requested, the average is complete. So I get a nice sound to let me know that I'm finished, and I get session complete at the top. From this point, if I choose to, I can press resume and add more data to this average. I don't have to stop here, but I'm ready, so I'm going to go ahead and press the green button to continue. And point 1 has been saved. Now the really cool thing about version 7 is that I can return to any given point and measure again on that same location. So I'm going to go back to point 1, Maybe it's the next day or a few hours later if I wanted to get some time delay in there. I'll just set 0.1 again, and I'll press average again. And this time I'm just going to do 10 measurements and a standard deviation where I had it before. And I'll press green check. And let's get 10 more seconds of data on 0.1. Okay, so what we're looking at now that we have two different sessions of data on this screen is the session screen. So I want to stop right here and briefly explain what I mean when I say session screen. It's important to understand how we describe the data in version 7. As in any previous version, there's only one final coordinate for any one point ID. But each coordinate can be made up of multiple sessions on the point. So in this graph, I have 4 sessions on this point, meaning different occupations when I went back and measured on this point 4 separate times. And each one of those sessions is made up of multiple measurements. So you have measurements, sessions, and coordinates. It becomes important to understand this as you start to drill into the data in the software. So in the case that I've just done, we have 2 sessions on this point, and the first session has 120 measurements, and the second session has 10 measurements. Those 2 sessions are then averaged together to create our final coordinate. So with that, let's jump back into SurvPC and look at the sessions dialog on the data that we just collected. So we can see here are 2 sessions, the first one 120 measurements and the second one 10 measurements, and these 2 are added together to create my final average coordinate in the bottom left. I can also see the range of my sessions and my standard deviation of the sessions in the bottom of this dialog. And the graph shows me, and it's a little difficult to see because my positioning is so good on this particular set, but you can see the individual sessions as blue stars in the graph, and the one that you have selected will show the red highlighting around it. So from the sessions dialog, we can drill further into the data. So I'm going to select my second session with only 10 measurements in it. I'm going to press the measurements button to look at the individual measurements from this session. Here I can see my 10 fixed plus measurements that make up the second session on this point. If I want to remove outliers, or I want to remove the worst measurements from this set, I'm going to sort by horizontal residuals. I'm going to find this one that has the highest residual, and I'm just going to turn it off. And if you noticed when I did that, the little black dot that was the furthest out actually disappeared from my graph. So I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to remove the biggest residual, and you can see that my standard deviation is going down as I do this. So I'm actually refining the data in the field, on the fly, removing the outliers to tighten up my data. So now that I'm finished with this session, I can green check, and I can come back in, and it should have improved my final standard deviation and range a little bit, and I can press green check to store this data. In this way, I can collect as much data as I want for my individual coordinates. So leaving the point ID on 1, maybe I'll choose to add a single measurement to this set. Now I have one single measurement, one set of 10 measurements, and one set of 120 measurements, all being averaged together to create the final coordinate. So I'll green check. And my coordinate 1, I can do it again. Let's do one more. Here we can see the 2 previous sessions to this point showed with the blue crosses. So I can see the 2 previous sessions. I can show the current average with the pink cross and the arrow ellipse. And now I have 4 sessions on this coordinate. At any time, I can always jump back over into the point list, choose point 1, and press info to see everything I need to know about this coordinate. So in this case, I can see that it's an average of 4 sessions. I have the rod height available, and if you used multiple rod heights, this will say varied because we don't have a single rod height. You can see the projection and the geoid that were used, the geoid shift. Everything you can want to know about these measurements is available in this screen. And then if I want to dig a little bit deeper, I can always press the sessions button and see the sessions that make up this coordinate. So from any one of these, I can select the session and press measurements to drill even further into this data. And here I'm looking at all the different measurements that made up this session. And we can see that some of them have been turned off. If I want to make changes to this measurement from the point screen, I'll need to back out of here. And instead of choosing info, I'll choose edit. And I'll choose sessions. And from here, I can turn on and off the individual sessions. So if I sort by horizontal residuals here, I can see that this final one that I did with the 5 measurements is a little out from the other 2. So I'll just turn that off. And when I do that, I would expect my standard deviation to go down, and it did. So once again, I've tightened up my data in the field by looking at the graph and looking at the data and removing the outliers to get the best possible position for my point. I'm going to green check to save my coordinate. And then I'm going to go back over into store points, and I want to go back into the average screen again for point 1. And I want to point out this redundancy session option, which I skipped earlier. Now this is a really powerful tool because what it allows you to do is repeat the average you have defined above multiple times with a delay in between. So a lot of times in the field, maybe you want to have some time delay to let the constellation move a little bit before you get another measurement. This will allow you to do this all within one screen. So you're setting up the whole thing ahead of time, and then you can leave the data there to do its work. Leave the collector. Maybe you want to get back in your truck and do some more work. It's all going to be happening automatically. So in this case, I'm going to turn on minimum measurement count of 5, standard deviation as I had it before, and I'm going to turn on redundancy sessions. So I'm going to say maybe 4 sessions, and normally you would have a longer time delay here, but for this example, I'm going to set our time delay for 0.10, so just 6 seconds between each one. And what it's going to do is collect an average to meet the requirements above, and then it's going to delay 0.10 minutes, and then do a RTK reset automatically, wait for a new fix, and repeat 4 times. So in that way, I'm going to collect 4 sessions of data on this point, all without touching anything. So let's go ahead and let this run and see how it looks. We can see the blue crosses representing our previous measurements, and we've collected the first one, so now it's counting down. We get our RTK reset, it waits for the fix, and we're repeating. So you can see how powerful this might be as giving you a way to set up your average exactly the way you want to collect the data and let the data collector do the work. So we should be coming into our final session now. Let's just watch what happens. Oh, I'm sorry, we've got one more. And we're finished. So I'll green check. And so now we have all the measurements that we previously collected, 120, 10, 1, 5. And at the bottom, we have 4 additional sessions with 5 measurements each. All of this is being combined to make up our final coordinate. So I hope that shows you what redundancy sessions does, and I hope that some of you find that useful in the field. I'm going to jump back out of here and go to the main menu. Before wrapping up this video, I want to point out one setting that's been added that's relevant to what we've been talking about. If you go to Equip Configure, you'll notice that there's a new Average GNSS tab that's been added on the right here, and this is all the settings for average, but I want to talk about just one of these, which is the coordinate match tolerance. So coordinate match tolerance is a new blunder detection that has been added for your benefit, and it's for these cases where we're measuring the same point multiple times. If you measure a point and then you come back with the same point ID, this is the tolerance that the software will check to make sure you're within the same proximity of your previous measurements to that point. So in this case, I have my coordinate match tolerance set to 0.098 feet, and I'm set to 3D. So if I come back in later and I measure the same point again and I don't fall within that tolerance, the software is going to warn me immediately that maybe I had the wrong point ID in, or there's something wrong with my position. This is just a new setting that should help you maybe prevent errors in the field and help you improve your data. So with that said, thank you so much for listening to this video. I hope everyone will go out and try out this new feature and let us know what you think.